It's my pleasure now to introduce one of our faculty members, Venkat Viswanathan, who's done work with Tesla and knows them well. Venkat is one of our really outstanding young energy professors, a member of the Scott Institute who has his office and laboratory in Scott Hall in the Scott Institute space. And I'm delighted he could be with us tonight to introduce our speaker, Professor Viswanathan. Venkat.
Thanks, Jerry. It is my great pleasure to introduce Andy Stevenson. Also, I think I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Andy for putting a wonderful visit of the Tesla team to CMU and the Energy Institute. I think this is a wonderful opportunity and I think this is the first step in a closer engagement between Tesla and the Scott Institute for Energy Innovation. Andy leads the special projects team in the office of Tesla's CTO and co-founder J.B. Straubel's personal investments and philanthropic projects. He also focuses a lot on education and workforce development initiatives, both at Tesla and outside. Andy began his career as a Fulbright scholar in Hong Kong. And then he got his JD and MBA at Stanford. Turns out that 2 years we were actually on the same campus. He was over with the cool people in the law school. I was in the engineering school, being a lab rat. And so Andy, after his JD and MBA at Stanford, joined Tesla. And he will tell us about the opportunity for students in building a sustainable energy future and the unique time we live in with the convergence of sustainable power production through solar energy and electric vehicles and energy storage and the interlinked way in which the three come together. Andy?
All right, how's everyone doing tonight? Good. I want to thank Venkat for that kind introduction. Really excited to be here, and sorry that JB could not join us, but he's asked me to fill in and give a perspective on a couple of things related to Tesla. One, kind of an overall history of the company and what we're looking to do, and then I'm also going to tell the story a little bit from my own perspective and some of the experiences I've had working there over the last couple years. So as Venkat mentioned, I work in special projects at Tesla, which is basically the department that you get put into if there's really no clear home for you in any of the other 30 departments at the company. And in that role, I've been working very closely with JB over the past couple years and focusing on a lot of projects that are either cross-functional in nature or don't really fit too neatly into one department or another. And the major one that I've been focused on has been our Gigafactory project, and specifically the challenge of how we build up a facility that's aiming to hire 6,500 people or more over the next couple years from scratch, from the ground up, in an area that doesn't have a lot of manufacturing base right now. And so I'll talk a little bit about in the presentation how we've gone about that and also provide an overall framework for a kind of problem-solving approach that I've seen work for students and others at Tesla that has been successful. So the overall title of the presentation is a scalable approach to problem solving. And what I'll do here is basically walk you through these kind of 6 core elements that I've seen at Tesla as being successful and being deployed across different problems, and how we've been able to develop this large company that's still been able to remain nimble enough to tackle lots of different problems. So I'm using scalable here in a few different ways. First is scalable in the way that you can tackle problems in a variety of different areas. So you're building energy products, you're building a factory, you're running a recruiting department, you're running a sales department. There's lots of different problems at the company, but I think what you'll find is there's a common set of values and a common set of building blocks that get used to tackle all of them. So that's the first kind of way that we're using Scalable. The second one is when you grow into a large company. So Tesla started out as a 5-person company, and now after the partnership acquisition with SolarCity, we're a 30,000 person company. And so this approach to problem solving is really critical when you grow to that size of a company, and you need a focused approach across the company in order to remain nimble and be able to not get too bogged down in bureaucracy. So I'll walk through these 6 core elements, and while doing that, kind of tell a little bit of the Tesla story and how each one has contributed. The first one is the mission of the company, and the fact that you'll achieve a lot more if you're motivated by an internal mission or passion than motivated by any kind of external goal. The second one is performance and organization in small teams. That the most successful unit of work is actually not going to be an individual or not going to be a large bureaucracy, but a small group of individuals who's tackling a project together. The third one is using a first principles approach to problem solving. And what that means is not saying we're doing it this way because company X or company Y is doing it, but really looking fundamentally at what the best way is to solve a problem based on physics, legal, business, other principles that you use to deploy against that problem. The next one is having a feeling of autonomy and self-motivation in doing your work. And what I mean by this is that you're not waiting for direction from others. You're not waiting for your boss or someone else to tell you how to perform a task or how to solve a problem. You're going out and doing it on your own in an entrepreneurial way. The fifth one is critical thinking and root cause analysis. And what this means is that when you're observing an effect or an issue, you're not just looking at the immediate cause, but you're going further upstream and doing further investigation to see what the ultimate cause of that effect is and solving that rather than what you're just immediately seeing. The final one is continuous improvement. And this maybe is the one that ties everything together, where when you're approaching a problem or approaching a product launch, you're not waiting until the very end or you have everything tied up in order to launch it. You're getting the product out there, and then you're using continuous improvement to always keep iterating, always keep improving on it over time. So first I'll talk a little bit about the mission, which is probably the one that you guys are most familiar with. Tesla has a very core mission that we still prioritize when we're hiring folks today. We've really found that people who are motivated by a mission, who are motivated by this passion, are going to work harder and do more than the folks that do not kind of have that internal motivation. So we've always tried to stick to that when building our teams, when growing the company, to find people who are really passionate about accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. We don't just have this kind of very high level, 500,000 foot mission of accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. I think it's also important to recognize the kind of slightly lower down mission that we had at the outset, which was called the secret master plan that our CEO put out over 10 years ago. And this is, I would say, a more actionable mission, not just that we're going to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, but how exactly we're going to do that. And basically, the goal was to develop a low-cost, mass-market vehicle and power that vehicle with sustainable energy sources. And it laid out a few of the intermediate steps that we would take to get there. And so I see this as a really critical part of having that mission orientation as well, as not just that really high-level mission, but the more actionable steps that you can rally people around for how you get there. The second item is organization and performance in small teams. I think this was really important and one that you can really look at the evidence to see that, of course, Tesla started out as a team of 5 people and grew a little bit even before the launch of the Roadster. But it wasn't one individual that developed all of the technology. It wasn't one individual who commercialized that product. And it wasn't, as well, a big company that did it. It wasn't one of the huge automotive OEMs. It really took a small team working together, tackling different elements of this problem in order to get it across the finish line. And I think a lot of you probably know some of the key elements of the Roadster that team developed, some of the key innovations. The major one, of course, is the use of lithium-ion battery cells and the recognition of how far the technology had come with lithium-ion technology relative to maybe what other people in the market thought. And that really allowed us to get to market and develop this Roadster product and get it out there sooner than anyone else really thought possible. Of course, like I mentioned, we've now grown substantially. We've turned into a company that's selling multiple products. We've launched a few even in the past couple years, the Model S, the Model X, our energy products business, and moving towards the launch of the Model 3. And as I mentioned before, keeping this orientation of small teams is really how we've been able to maintain that nimble approach and that nimble culture while we have grown so much. So while we may be a 30,000 person company, we really see ourselves as being organized into small teams that are tackling these different problems and pushing them across the finish line, rather than one 30,000 company that's working towards one objective. And so this is a really key part of how we've kind of scaled our approach to problem solving. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the first principles approach, which is really using fundamental reasoning in order to solve problems, usually physics in the case of electric vehicles, but it can be other things as well, rather than relying on the way other people have done it. And you can really see the use of this logic in our Model S and the design of our battery pack that eventually went into our Model S and Model X products. This was really, unlike the Roadster, was designed from the ground up to be an electric vehicle. All of the innovation that went into it was focused on leveraging the electric vehicle technology, using the battery cells, designing the way the battery cells were put together, and designing all of the other elements in a vehicle in a way that was optimized for electric vehicles. So this was a key departure even from some of the elements of the Roadster product development process, but really was the first time the company had aggressively deployed this first principles approach in launching a product. And of course, the results with the Model S have been very successful. We've had very high ratings from a lot of the consumer reports companies. We've been able to achieve a range of 335 miles in EPA testing, and it's been our best-selling product to date. And on that same platform, we also obviously have produced the Model X using the same battery pack architecture that was first developed using that first principles approach. And so that's, I'd say, one of the very key things that goes into our continued product development process, kind of drawing on that successful experience we had. The next one I'll talk about is autonomy and self-motivation. And this idea, as I mentioned before, is the fact that you don't want to wait for any sort of external group or external body, whether it be your manager or anyone else, to tell you what to do. You should be able to set your own priorities and figure out what you need to do on your own. And so this is, I'm looking at some of our sales managers in the audience here, and so maybe they have a different opinion about this one. But the example that I want to use to illustrate this is our supercharger product when we developed and launched that. And so at the beginning, in the early days of electric vehicles, it was a little bit less certain exactly how the charging infrastructure would take shape. So there were a lot of people out there that weren't sure if one company would develop their own external charging infrastructure on their own. There was a lot of talk about possibly that the government would get involved in developing the infrastructure, large utilities might get involved in developing the infrastructure, or other third-party companies. And what happened was that we saw that there was a lot of talk about it, but nothing was actually happening. And that if we were actually going to get these products on the road, we needed to solve one of the biggest problems that our customers were concerned about, which was the range of the vehicles and whether they'd be able to charge them when they were on long road trips. And so instead of sort of waiting for that consensus to form and eventually crystallize into an actionable plan or product, we went ahead and developed this network ourselves. And it's ended up being an extremely widespread network around the world. And one of our most loved product by a lot of customers, that they're able to leverage this charging network that we developed. But in the early days, that was not at all obvious that this is something that an individual electric vehicle company should be doing. The next thing I want to talk about is the critical thinking and root cause analysis. And the example that I want to use for this is our energy products business. So the way that we apply this type of thinking can be across a range of different problems. But generally, the way we use it is that when you observe an effect or a situation, either kind of in a specific manufacturing line or within a broader system, you don't look at just the kind of immediate cause of that effect, but you look beyond that, either further out in time or to further issues that could have also been causes of that. And so the energy products business was really one we developed to solve a specific problem that we were facing. Obviously, I talked a little bit about the mission at the outset and how one of the things we wanted to do was be a sustainable company. But we were facing a problem with getting renewable energy to high levels of penetration on the grid. At that time, there were a lot of concerns about the cost of different renewable energy technologies, about the efficiency of some of the technologies. But we really saw this issue that would come up down the road in getting these technologies to very high penetration on the grid, and that could only be solved by energy storage. And fortunately, we had a lot of expertise in energy storage that we had developed through our vehicle business that could be applied to battery storage, stationary battery storage. So that's really what led to the development of our energy products business, was this concern that we couldn't really achieve our mission. We couldn't get to the high levels of renewable energy penetration that we wanted unless we built this storage technology. And that's since grown to be a very successful business where we're selling both the Powerwall for home batteries and then also the Power Pack. And this is a picture of our recent installation that we did with Southern California Edison. And so it's really become one of our main products for ensuring a high penetration of renewable energy on the grid. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about one of the key parts of these building blocks, which is continuous improvement. And the way that we think about this is that when you're developing a product, when you're developing a service, you shouldn't wait until you have 100% of the issues figured out. You should get the product out there and then get feedback and then improve on it over time. And so a lot of companies in Silicon Valley are used to doing this with software or things like that, where it's very easy to release a product and then change it over time. We've decided to take this to another level and have been applying this approach to an entire building. And so the Gigafactory is the new battery facility that we've been building in Nevada. And the way that we've been approaching that construction project has been using this continuous improvement methodology. And the way that we've done that is by building one section and starting production in one section while we're also building the other sections of the factory. And what this allows us to do is when we build a new section, we're incorporating all of the latest technology and all of the latest learnings that we've had into that new section. So it's really a continuous improvement methodology applied at a very, very high level to an entire building. And what we've been able to do using that is achieve some pretty impressive results in just the few years that we've been constructing this facility. And so that's one of the really neat ways in which that is applied to even something like a construction project. So that's kind of the overview and the backstory on Tesla and how we've used these 6 core building blocks to solve a lot of the challenges that we've faced so far. And now I want to talk a little bit about how these can be applied to the new challenges that we're facing. Of course, the one that's probably foremost on everyone's mind and foremost at the company is the development and launch of the Model 3. This is the product that a lot of attention and a lot of effort at the company is being focused on right now because it is really the last step in that initial master plan that was laid out 10 years ago. And such a critical part of our mission, achieving our mission, is not just developing sort of relatively low volume, relatively high cost electric vehicles, but we want something that's mass market and that's available to all consumers, because we're not going to achieve our mission if we don't get that on the road. And so the Model 3 is not only kind of a key part of our commercial strategy, but really a key part of achieving that overall mission. Of course, like I mentioned before, we really try to use this overall methodology in a scalable way. And so, while you may think that focusing on the Model 3 is kind of enough for one company, or the Model 3 and the Gigafactory, because we use this more scalable approach to solving problems, we can have small teams that are focused on many different problems at once. And so we're not just tackling the Model 3, we're not just tackling the Gigafactory, but we're tackling a number of new product initiatives. 3 of those that I'll touch on briefly are the Solar Roof, the Autopilot initiative, and our machine that builds the machine project, which is basically factory automation. So this is our Solar Roof product, and one where we've really aggressively used that first principles reasoning to approach it. You know, we really went back to the basics, and a lot of people had attempted similar things before. They had attempted sort of more integrated photovoltaic and building products. But we really went back to the basics and asked questions like, what does a roof really need to do? You know, what do people really expect out of their roof? And through sort of asking those first principles questions, we were able to develop this product, which kind of blew everyone away when it was launched in terms of how it looked compared to a conventional roof and what people expected from a kind of solar roof product. Of course, there's still a lot of challenges in getting it across the finish line and getting it into production, but this was really a strong application of that first principles thinking. The next one I'll talk about is our autopilot programs, one which I know is very active at Carnegie Mellon and in the Pittsburgh area is research in this area. And the building block that was really applied here, and I think is really distinctive for Tesla, is this continuous improvement methodology. And so 2 of the items there that you can see, one is that all of our new cars have the full suite of self-driving sensors. And the second one is that we can introduce upgrades over the network, over-the-air upgrades. And that's something we've been doing for a long time in all of our vehicles, but really provides an incredible competitive advantage for us, in that we can make the cars better over time and sort of continuously improve them without a customer having to come in and buy a new model. So this is something that is kind of a core part of our technology and a core part of our autopilot program. Finally, I want to talk about the machine that builds the machine project. And so this is really a strong example of the sort of autonomy and self-motivation building block that is key at Tesla. What sort of led to the development of this initiative is that most of the times when we set up a new production line, we're relying on a network of suppliers who do the systems integration for the robotics and other elements of the production line. And we really felt that while they were performing well, that it was almost like we were shopping from a catalog in terms of what we were getting. And they weren't giving us as much innovation and as many options as we wanted. So we really wanted to take it into our own hands and see how much innovation we could achieve if we started doing it ourselves. And so that's been another big priority of the company that we focused on a lot, is developing these factory automation initiatives. So while all of that is a lot, of course there's many other things that the company is working on. Innovating new ways to sell these products, scaling our service and support networks in order to support an ever larger number of vehicles and products, building a global company and developing products that work well in many different geographies, really starting to rethink our material supply chain and where we're sourcing materials from. And then finally, one that I've worked on a lot, which is our recruiting and education programs. And these are all things that we're applying the same sort of thinking to, and we really strive to do in an innovative way, even if they are, maybe the more thought of as the more conventional business functions at the company. So in closing, I really wanted to call out that opportunity and highlight the opportunity that many students would have to come and work at the Gigafactory and come and work at Tesla and help us tackle some of these problems. And preview a little bit of what you would get from doing that is you'll really learn this problem-solving approach and get to tackle some of these awesome projects and come away with not only sort of a specific product or a specific piece of technology that you'll develop, but this overall mindset of how you would approach problems. Thanks.
Advance it one more time. Thank you. Andy will take some questions for a few minutes. Here is the Twitter handle if you want to submit them that way, or just keep your hand up and we'll pass around cards that you can write your question on. So while you're submitting your questions, let me ask one. So it wasn't that long ago that you were a clueless undergraduate studying geosciences at Williams. And I imagine you weren't sitting there thinking, I'm going to work for Tesla someday. So the question is, sort of try to put yourself now in the shoes of our undergraduates. What should they be doing to get themselves ready to be successful in a company like Tesla?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think the way that I've tried to approach it over the years and sort of in my career have moved from working in policy to working in the private sector was that I really always wanted to focus on solving whatever seemed like the most interesting and important problems that were out there in sustainability and sustainable energy. So when I was an undergrad studying geosciences, studying geology, it seemed like I really wanted to work on policy because there were a lot of interesting things happening with the international climate negotiations and with legislation that was being pursued in Congress to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. And I really wanted to understand the scientific aspects of it so I could contribute to that discussion. After a couple years of working in that field and seeing that progress had stalled on the policy front and that we might not expect a lot of quick action, really saw that a lot of the innovation and attention was being shifted over towards the private sector and towards companies like Tesla and other renewable energy companies that were developing this technology. And so that's kind of when I decided to reorient in that direction. And that would be my advice to students is really figure out kind of what you think are the most important problems and most important areas to be working on to advance sustainability and focus on those. And I think at the current time, a lot of that action is happening not only at Tesla, but at other similar kind of small to mid-sized renewable energy companies that are aggressively deploying this technology.
Thank you. Good advice. Got a lot of questions here. All right, so here's the theme. One of the realities of being in a business like yours is that every state is unique in its regulatory environment, the incentives they provide or not. How do you deal with that? And do you actively work with your customers to help them deal with their local regulatory environments?
Yeah, like you said, it is a very kind of state-by-state approach that we use. I think generally what we do is really try to make the substantive case for why we believe electric vehicles are important and an important contribution to addressing climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and try to keep that discussion on kind of a substantive level. Obviously, sometimes it kind of moves beyond that, and we have to engage in that. But that's really how we think about it is what is the right policy to have here, and how can we engage in a very sort of substantive way.
No, Andy cannot tell you when your Model 3 is arriving. So stop asking. Here's an interesting question. So Tesla, of course, is unique, and you occupy a special space. But are there other companies that you sort of admire in terms of adopting a mission that you would put in the same class as Tesla? Others come to mind?
That's a really good question. I think I'll just kind of talk about maybe some of the other companies that I was interested in applying to when I was in graduate school. I think a lot of the bigger solar companies are doing a lot of really neat work, and the ones that are sort of active in deploying products into the market. You think of SunPower, First Solar, other sort of large-scale solar companies. And then, companies, there's a lot of also very interesting kind of, they call them sort of clean web type of companies where they're sort of using software as a way to drive renewable energy and drive sustainability. And so a company like O-Power, which recently got acquired, is one that I thought was pretty interesting when I was in school. But there's so many of them out there now that I think what I really tell people now who are excited about sustainability is that the best way to have an impact on it is to pursue a professional career in the field, in industry. I think maybe that didn't seem obvious or true to me about 10 years ago when I was finishing school, just because there weren't nearly as many of those companies that were at an interesting stage. But I think right now, that really resonates, is that this is kind of the time to be having an impact.
All right, they're going to start getting tougher now. I didn't ask these. I didn't write these questions. It's a good one. So the machine that builds machines. One of the questions we ponder a lot around here is, so what does that do to the human workforce? And what's the sort of the end point there? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think the end point is really anyone's guess still, if you take it very far out into the future. But in terms of sort of the near-term things that we're thinking about, it really requires us to work extremely closely with the education system because we want to hire people who are not just doing manual assembly. We want to hire people who are able to maintain and interact with these automated systems. And that just requires a very sophisticated and advanced level of technical training. So we've in Nevada worked very closely with the education system to develop training programs so that people can have a meaningful role in helping maintain those production lines and work with the robotics that we're deploying. And so that's kind of how we're approaching it, is really trying to make sure that we're providing the right training so people can still have an important role there.
So a lot of people are intrigued about what's next, given the audacious nature of the mission itself and all the projects you're working on, and then CEO's fertile imagination. We're all wondering things like, so you're going to start working on distributing electricity to residential users? Will there be Tesla trucks on the horizon?
Well, I
Can you
think
say anything about
the truck is one that our CEO has mentioned that Tesla is interested in, and really I look at sort of all different modes of transportation, and that was one of the elements of the latest version of the master plan. The master plan part 2 that came out was developing a Tesla product to address all of the major vehicle segments. And so I think that's something that, it's kind of a part of the mission of the company, but it could be a long ways down the road when we actually get to those other products. But it's definitely something that's kind of part of the next generation of that mission. And I think with regards to your first question about whether Tesla would get more involved in energy distribution, I think right now we're kind of in an interesting place because we both have a behind-the-meter product. We also have a front-of-the-meter product that's a large-scale battery system that we're partnering with utilities on selling. We just sold an 80 megawatt-hour system to Southern California Edison. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done between Tesla and all electric utilities out there.
So you've got a few volunteers to offer up their houses for a solar roof if you're looking for demonstrations. But the question is, when will that be available to the general public as a commercial product.
Yeah, I think our CEO tweeted a few days ago that it was going to be going on sale in April, which is what, like 3 days away. As far as when it will actually be available, I really cannot say at this point.
Yeah. So a good question. What about the materials that go into manufacturing of batteries and their global availability and sourcing them?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting issue, and that one that we have in the development of the Gigafactory been spending an incredible amount of time focusing on. We think that there are opportunities for a lot of innovation in that, and so we're sort of aggressively looking into the supply chains for all of the major materials that we're using in the battery, and figuring out how we can sort of optimize what's out there, whether we can develop any new technologies that could address any issues that come up.
So everybody wants a Tesla car. Everybody now wants a solar roof. And a lot of these people want a job. So what do you, I know you don't lead recruiting for the company, but when you are recruiting, what are you looking for?
I think that was a lot of what I was talking about there was those kinds of sort of looking into someone's career and seeing how they've been applying those principles in the different problems that they've been tackling is really kind of how we screen candidates. I think at a very sort of tactical level, most of our hiring is from engineering departments, although there's certainly many salespeople and other functions within the company. And so having a sort of engineering background and having mechanical engineering is probably the one that's kind of the most widespread within the engineering department. And then beyond that, it's really about getting the experience, kind of using that methodology of solving problems, and that's really the best way to go.
Thank you so much, Andy. We really appreciate it. It was terrific.